So I'd like to welcome all of you here today for this special presentation of how do I value that? And we're really happy to have uh, Leila Dunbar with us. Leila and I first made our connections through the Appraisal Foundation when she was serving as a member of the Board of Trustees and eventually found herself being elevated to the position of chair of the Board of Trustees of the Appraisal Foundation. And we haven't stayed in contact that much, but I've watched her occasionally on Antiques Roadshow, and I was just really thrilled when she agreed to step in and make a presentation here for our how do you value or how do I value that? So, Leila, I'm going to not take any more time. I know you want to talk about yourself and about how you value things. So I'd like to just turn this session over to you. Folks, you can put your questions in the chat, or as we're going along, you should feel free to also, if you got a question, you can unmute yourself, raise your hand, and we can take the questions verbally as well. So Leila, with that.
That's great. Thanks, Steve. And by the way, my full name's Leila, but growing up in Massachusetts in Milford, I was known as Leila Dunbar. So you can use Lee. That's just fine. Okay. It's easier for most people and substitute teachers. So I appreciate that. And I'm so happy everyone's here today. And what we are going to talk about, as I was just telling Steve and Deb a couple of minutes ago, there's always two things that I get asked. And it's how did I get started in appraising sports memorabilia? And how do you value items? And we're going to learn a little bit about both today. So I grew up, as I mentioned to you, in Milford, Massachusetts, and my dad was a demo derby and stock car driver. He actually raced in Westboro at the old Speedway, which is now a shopping mall. But we ran a junkyard, General Motors junkyard. And what people don't believe until I show them photos is we were the boutique of junkyards. As you can see here, we dismantled cars with an air gun. We had special storage racks for everything. And in the late 60s, my dad built dune buggies. And our most famous one was building one for Ken Harrelson when he played for the Red Sox. And as you can see in the photo, he was quite a dandy. So, of course, we had to make this special custom dune buggy for him, which looks like, I know, wallpaper on the outside. He even had a TV inside that he could plug in and use. And that was probably one of the coolest things ever, because in my first job at 8 years old, we were putting together kits as I had to put together all the nuts and bolts. And my reward, by the way, was a cheeseburger, which was pretty good. So I had to put this in too. That's my dad's secretary, Dartha. And you can tell this is from the 1970s, a much different era. This is at the junkyard, but we advertised, as you can see, for parts. And the running joke was Martha was my mom and Dartha. So we had Martha and Dartha. It should have been a sitcom. But that gives you kind of an idea of what growing up in the junkyard in the backwoods of Massachusetts was like. I had 30 acres and my own go-kart. It was a pretty good gig. So how did we get into memorabilia? Well, if you look in the lower left-hand corner, my dad collected antique toys, advertising, and folk art. We started doing Brimfield in the 1970s when it was one field in 2 days, and you get up at 6 in the morning, you'd park by the side of the road, they'd let you in, and you could basically fill up your car for like $300. Now that would barely get you there, with gas and lunch. But he did that basically because he needed to relax from the junkyard business. And we had automotive memorabilia. But what happened was, and that's me, by the way, that's our wrecker in the upper left-hand corner. What happened was I graduated from college with a journalism and Spanish degree, and I went to work for my dad buying auto wrecks at auction with guys named Blonde Bobby, Little Anthony, and One Arm Joey. And yes, those are real people. I did that for several years. And then I decided one day that we needed to get into the antiques business full time, which was very naive because we basically went from a 5-day, 40-hour work week to a 7-day, 70-hour work week. But we specialized, as I said, right here, antique toys, advertising, and folk art. And that, our gallery was actually run out of our junkyard. And we were kind of the forerunner to eBay. We did mail order from the gallery. I'd send out listings, literally cut and paste photos to sheets, send photos out to clients. We had auctions there. And if you guys remember the old PBS WGBH auctions with the big tote boards, we had the same thing. We would go until midnight or 3 a.m. and we'd sell collections of motorcycle memorabilia, automotive, toys, Halloween memorabilia, and it was a blast. I actually really enjoyed it. But it was, you were selling stuff that was basically $5 to 5,000. But my big break was going on the Antiques Roadshow, which started in Concord, Massachusetts in 1996. I was there at the very first show, and I was very fortunate because I met all the folks from Sotheby's. Now, there are two major auction houses, Sotheby's and Christie's. They're the largest in the world, and they do like $8 billion a year. So I got to know the folks at Sotheby's, and when they needed a new director of the collectibles department in 1999, they recruited me. So I was very fortunate to go, and it's only because of Roadshow. And these are a couple of my favorite Roadshow pieces. On the right-hand side, you'll see the original working lyrics to Cotton Club. I'm not only a big big sports fan, but I've been a big jazz fan all my life. My parents played Duke Ellington and Billie Holiday and Billy Strayhorn and you name it, Dave Brubeck, growing up. And I was a jazz DJ in the 90s for WICN out of Worcester. Jazz for Central New England. I sound much taller and blonder generally on the radio, which was great. Loved doing it. And I actually worked for GBH for a year. I used to do their overnights. I used to fill in for Eric in the evening. So to be able to see these original working lyrics for Stormy Weather on Cotton Club stationery, and they were brought in by Jeff Kohler, whose grandfather, Ted Kohler, wrote them in a half an hour at a party for Ethel Waters. It was pretty spectacular. And at the time, I put 100 to 150,000 on them. That was probably 10 years ago, and I think they've gone up from that. Another favorite piece is, you'll see this football uniform. That's Sam Huff of the Washington Redskins before they were the Commanders, or as I like to call it, the world's largest onesie. I mean, it's ginormous. And that woman who brought it in, her father was a diplomat and got to know Sam Huff in the 60s, and Huff gave it to him. And that value I put on was about 40 to 60,000. And I was at Sotheby's from 1999 to 2008. And I was very lucky. I get to sell some really cool things. Although I have to tell you, slightly upsetting as a Red Sox fan, painful is the word, because this bat is the first bat, is the bat that Babe Ruth hit the very first home run with at grand opening day, Yankee Stadium, 1923. Whoops. And who were they playing? The Red Sox, of course. I also sold the contract selling Ruth from the Red Sox to the Yankees from 1919. Of course, it felt a little better because the bat sold for $1.25 million and the contract sold for $996,000. And at the time, I think they sold him for about $125,000. Of course, that's worth a lot more today. The contract resold in 2017 for over $2 million. So you'll see, I'll be talking about the appreciation of the sports market, but you can see it right there. I also did a great golf club collection, Joe DiMaggio rookie jersey. I left Sotheby's in 2008 and I went on my own. I'm a full-time appraiser. That's all I do. People hire me to appraise for insurance, donation, litigation, estates. I do a lot of dead celebrities. Half of what I do is sports, a quarter of what I do is entertainment, and a quarter of what I do is miscellaneous pop culture. But these are some of the folks that I've done work for. I know, and I keep bringing up the Evil Empire. We will be getting to Boston memorabilia soon, I promise. But I do all the work for the Yankees because they have a museum. I do work for the Baseball Hall of Fame, the Pro Football Hall of Fame, the Cardinals, the Smithsonian. And I've done a lot of collections too. I've done Kareem's collection. It's Floyd Mayweather in the middle. I did his boxing collection. And I did Larry Bird's collection, which is so cool because they opened a museum. If you're in Indiana, you have to go to Terre Haute because they did a full museum on Larry Bird's collection. So his championship rings, his game used jerseys, his NBA trophies, his game, certain game used basketball sneakers. It's great. If you can get out there, please do it. I also did Bobby Orr's collection, which I have to tell you was my biggest crush growing up in Massachusetts. One of my first memories, as being a 9-year-old with my mom watching this game 7 when he scored, watching this game with the Stanley Cup when he scored in overtime to win that. And I'm sure you guys remember that as well. On the flip side, I also did Mickey Mantle's estate. Mickey Mantle scored in many ways, by the way, different from Bobby Orr, but we'll leave that one alone. Muhammad Ali's estate, which was fantastic, including fight-worn trunks, posters, his Islamic writings. It was a fascinating collection. And then Arnold Palmer's estate, I did as well when he passed away, same year as Muhammad Ali. I love Arnold Palmer. He's such a swashbuckling sort of player. So let's get to sports memorabilia. So here are some interesting Boston pieces. So what we're going to talk about today is how I value sports memorabilia. And it's really similar to real estate. And we're going to talk about the value factors and the methodology. And we're going to go through autographs, memorabilia, and cards. And I'm also going to talk about the effect of the pandemic on the market. And a few of you sent in items to appraise, and we're going to do those as well. I will tell you up front, none of you won the lottery today. Don't go out spending that money yet, but we've got some good things to say about your pieces. So again, these are some just interesting ones. This is Babe Ruth's rookie card, 1916, when he led the Red Sox to the World Series. That does not look like looks like an awkward follow through there, but that's Ruth. He could have been a Hall of Fame pitcher too. Bobby Orr signed Bruins puck. Larry Lucchino's championship ring, the architect of the Red Sox, and a Brady game-worn jersey. So you can see how wide the market is from just a couple $100 all the way into several $100,000. So what do we look at for value factors? We look at the historical importance and enduring legacy of the player, the event, or the team, or all of the above. We also look at how rare an item is, which usually goes hand in hand. Because, for instance, there's only one bat that Ruth used to hit the first home run ever at Yankee Stadium. There's only one stick that Bobby Orr had to score the overtime goal to win the Stanley Cup. So rarity goes hand in hand, usually with historical importance. And then condition. And again, that's inverse. The more items you have, the more important condition becomes. Then provenance and authenticity, because one of the biggest issues in sports memorabilia, as we'll see, is authenticity. There are a lot of fakes and forgeries that are on the market. Some of them are malicious and some of them are just inadvertent, which we'll talk about with autographs. And then there's the wild card, and that's desirability. Something can be old, it can be rare, it can have perfect provenance, it can be in great condition, but if no one wants it, it doesn't really matter. And as you can see, there are different levels here. Your sort of starter collection can be 5 to 5,000. Your middle collection can be 5 to 25. And your advanced goes from the tens of thousands all the way up into the tens of millions of dollars. And COVID has had a big effect on the market. In 2012, I could count on both hands the number of $1 million items. Since COVID, today, it's probably somewhere between 500 and 700 sports items that are $1 million and up. Think about that. And what happened during COVID is that you had people at home, they were bored. You remember this. People had money. All of a sudden, there were two things that happened: availability and perception. You could find these online sales, and all of a sudden the perception of sports memorabilia sort of went from being people saw it as an undervalued market and an alternative investment, and they thought stuff was really cool. So you combine the perception of the coolness of the stuff along with potential undervalue, along with the availability of the stuff, and it created an enormous sea change where items just started selling for multiples of what they have before. The top of the market has continued to rise since then. The middle of the market and the lower end of the market have stabilized and actually, and for some parts, as we'll see, have lost value, but the values are still well above pre-pandemic levels. You'll see that baseball today is still king, but it's fascinating how basketball, football, and golf in particular, and hockey and soccer have made ginormous leaps in value, particularly at the top of the market, where they're also selling in the millions. And the buyers are predominantly in the US, but there are buyers throughout the world, and they're generally in more global sports than baseball. Baseball, really, the bulk of your people who buy are here. So what's the methodology? What do? Do I magic 8-ball, Ouija ball, roulette wheel? No. It's basically the same. In real estate, what you're looking at is the location, of course, the number of bedrooms, the number of baths, the configuration of the house, whether there's a swimming pool, a garage, the desirability of it. And then you compare. What I do is the same thing. If you have a signed Babe Ruth ball, you have a game used jersey, I'm looking for other game used jerseys or signed baseballs by that person. And then I adjust for the value factors that I just spoke about. Is the historic importance, is it more important? Is it more desirable? Is the condition better? Is the authenticity better? And I take all of that and juggle it and come up with an opinion of value. And as we'll talk about it, the items that are going to have the most value are these one-of-a-kind pieces that represent a historical moment, like this 1932 Babe Ruth New York Yankee called shot jersey from the 32 World Series. So what you're going to see is that most autographs of living celebrities, living athletes, are going to sell between $25 and $500. Why is that? Well, because they're so available. Up until the 1970s, you could get autographs by meeting the person, right? If you were at a ball game, or if they were retired, you might meet them at an event that they were going to. But there was no such thing as signing shows. Or you could send away. You could send away to the team, or believe it or not, you could often find their own addresses. But in the 1970s, they started having signing shows. And they would pay the athletes, usually in cash, by the way. And a lot of these athletes could make more in a year than they could make, in a year that when they were playing baseball. They would hire them for the day. They'd come in, you'd pay 10 or 15 or 25 bucks, and they would sign your ball or they would sign your card. And they still do it. You now have these you have companies that do signings, from Steiner to Fanatics to Upper Deck. So it's much easier to get an athlete's signature than it was in those days. So because of that, athletes who passed away before 1970, their signatures are a much shorter supply, which makes them rare, which makes them more valuable. And you can see it right here. I mean, here's our own Poppy, who we love. If you're going to buy this retail from a dealer, it will probably cost you $300 or $400. If you went to an auction, interestingly enough, because most of your advanced collectors who are interested in Poppy may already have this, you could probably buy it for $75 to $150. So there's a big difference in some things between the retail and the auction market, particularly when you have stuff that's very available. Now you see the flip side here. Ty Cobb passed away in 1960. So a Ty Cobb signed baseball can actually sell anywhere between $10,000 and close to $100,000, depending on condition. And you see this Ty Cobb signed and inscribed postcard. The reason why I put that in is you see again the impact that COVID had on this. You could have bought this in 2017 for $84,000. It resold in 2024 for $111,000. And again, historical importance during legacy, rarity, quality, desirability. Jackie Robinson broke the color line in 1947. Very desirable signed baseball. He passed away at the young age of 52 in 1972 of diabetes. His signed baseballs, again, sell anywhere from probably, at this time, depending on condition and where it's signed and whether it's personalized, from $20,000 to, believe it or not, a couple of $100,000. if you have him on the sweet spot and it's graded like a 9 on a scale of 1 to 10. And this 1939 Hall of Famer signed first day cover. This was the first induction of the Hall of Fame ever. They had their first vote in 1936, but they built the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown in 39. They had their first induction ceremony for the first 4 classes. There's 11 players on here, and they all signed this first day cover. These are incredibly desirable, incredibly rare. And they had the stamp come out on that day. So you could go to the post office, get your first day cover, and then have them all sign, which is pretty spectacular. And that's why that sold for $138,000. But here's what most of we are all going to have in our collections and what we're going to see. Signed footballs here, Peyton Manning, Larry Bird, Mickey Mantle. Now, Mantle sells for more, even though he signed thousands upon thousands of baseballs. It's interesting. He's probably, of all the contemporary athletes, or what you consider of the last, I know he stopped his career in 69, but he is the most sought after of your modern athlete. And depending on the inscription on his baseballs, again, anywhere between $300 and $3,000. But you can see most here. Ted Williams, again, Teddy Ballgame, $800 to $2,500. He was like Mantle. He signed an enormous amount. Auction, again, you can buy for a lot less than you can generally for retail, but it's higher than $200 to $500 now. It's actually more between $500 and $1,500 for a good Ted Williams ball. But you can see others, Magic Johnson, $200 to $500, Gretzky and Rogers. So these are all very obtainable for the most part. So can any of you guys read any of these signatures? It's nearly impossible, I know. But that also will give you a hint, because you see all these signatures. You can read Ted Williams. You can read Mickey Mantle, right? You can't read Dylan Larkin. You can sort of read Peyton Manning. But the later the signature, generally, the more you can't read it, the later the signature, and the more likely that it's going to be worth in the low to mid hundreds. So this first one, by the way, and again, I know I'm a diehard Red Sox fan too, so forgive me. Mookie Betts, before he went to the Dodgers, Aaron Rodgers, Mike Trout, Tom Brady. So this will give you, it's hieroglyphics, I know, and my signature isn't much better, but this will show you that it's a late signature and generally worth low to mid hundreds. Again, 2004 World Series ball. I think the second one is Manny Ramirez, and I think at the end he put 24. I think Ortiz is underneath him, and I think Euclid is underneath that. I can't even remember who the one is on the right, but that helps you. Because these living celebrities, there's an infinite supply of signatures, which is what keeps the value down. And as I said, 50, 75, 100, up to 500. Now, condition is really important when it comes to vintage balls in particular. So this Walter Johnson signed baseball sold for $20,000. Walter Johnson, great pitcher for the Senators, passed away in, I always forget, I believe it's 1950 at the age of 46, or it's 46 at the age of 50. But anyway, he passed away at a relatively young age. I don't know if any of you saw the Antiques Roadshow segment, but I had a lady come in from California who had found this in her father's file cabinet, the ball on the right, and it looks like it had just been signed yesterday. And she said he got it in the 1920s, which makes sense because Walter Johnson was actually out in California at that point. And you see it's just a beautiful condition signature ball, and you see it's got the original box with it. I valued it at $60,000 to $80,000 because most Walter Johnson baseballs from that era sell between $5,000 and $20,000 because they're generally in the condition that you see. This is the only one that's ever been seen in this condition, and these get graded now on a scale of 1 to 10. This got graded at an 8, which is the highest grade ever. Now, I told you 60 to 80,000, right? And I told her insurance would be 150,000. I would have been a hero at 150,000, 315,000. And the reason why it sold for so much is because there were so many collectors out there who didn't have one in this condition and needed it for their collection. Now, the next one of these that comes out won't sell for that kind of money because it will be the second one out and there'll already have been one major player off the market. And if more of them come out, it will dilute the market. But if another one doesn't come out for 3 to 5 years, it'll sell for that much or maybe even more. So this is a Babe Ruth, Mickey Mantle, and Roger Maris sign ball. This came into the road show. And the story was he got it for his 13th birthday with Babe Ruth on it. But he lived in Kansas City, and his coach for his little league team brought them to a game with the Yankees and the Athletics at that time, and he had it signed by Mickey Mantle and Roger Maris. It was 1961. It's the only known baseball signed by Ruth, Maris, and Mantle. And at the time, I valued it at 30,000 to 50,000, and this is 2009. Today, I think it would be 100 to 150,000 because it's the only ball known with those signatures on it. It could be more. So I ended that segment. I don't know if you saw it, but I ended it. I asked him, I said, so what did you get for your 14th birthday? And he just laughed. This was obviously much more memorable. So I appreciate, Alan, are you the person who sent this? Yes, thank you. So this is a really cool piece, by the way. This 1990s Ted Williams and Friends, 329 of 521. 521 was the number of his career home runs. And it's got his teammates basically from his late 40s teams, the team that lost the 46 World Series. Hall of Famer Bobby Doerr, Dom DiMaggio, who should be in the Hall of Fame, but that's another discussion. Eddie Pellegrini and Johnny Pesky. And we all know Johnny Pesky, Pesky Pole. And this was done by an artist, James Amori, and they all signed it. It's a really cool piece. The problem is that a lot of them have come out and they've been sold in group lots. And generally what they've been sold in these group lots is about $100 to $150. Now, I think this is the type of piece that as you go along in time, it's going to keep going up in value because eventually all these are going to be put in different collections and it's going to be harder to get this piece. So right now I'm saying 100, 150, but realistically with those signatures in that group, it really should be $500 to $1,000. That's what it should be. And I think that over time, it will continue to rise and get to that point. If you can buy one today for $100, I say do it, but it's weird that they've come up at auction in groups of 6 or 10. I'm guessing people bought bunches of them at that time and hoarded them. That's the only thing I can think of. Jim Rice signed baseball. So Jim Rice, one of my all-time favorite players. And if he had been healthy for the 75 World Series, I really think we would have beaten the Reds. I don't think we would have lost in 7 games. I mean, here's, to me, one of the most underrated players. I mean, if you lead all major league players in hits, RBIs, and total bases, and all the American League in home runs and runs scored for 11 years, I think that's pretty impressive. I love Jim, and he's a good commentator too. But again, Jim is still alive. He's signing hundreds, if not thousands of baseballs, $50 to $125. Now, when he passes away, it will go to a finite sum. It may go up a little bit at that point because, again, it goes from infinite to finite. It just depends how much. Now, if he had inscribed this, like all of his stats, now it's 300 to 500. Why? Because there are less of those available. It's rarer and it's more desirable because it has more information on it. So Jason Veritek and Jim Rice should be spelled with a C. I do not know what happened there. Typo there. But you get the captain of the Red Sox, the leader of the 2004, 2007 World Series teams, and you've got Jim with his notation for Hall of Fame. On this, again, I'd put probably $150 to $250 again, because you can still get their signature. Now, if you add more signatures on here, it will raise the value. And if you get Poppy and Pedro and Manny, players from the 2000 or Mookie, and if you get from the Rice era, if you can get Yaz, Dewey, Fred Lynn, Burleson, those kind of guys, the more you get on this, the more it will actually increase in value. So issues that you have to deal with in autographs, fakes and forgeries. If you look down here, so what happened was, very briefly, is that in the 90s, it was the Wild West, was selling on the internet. And it really culminated in this book, which is great, called Operation Bullpen. There was a guy who was a failed artist on the West Coast, but he found he could forge Mickey Mantle's signature. And he put out millions of dollars of fake signatures for the next 10 years until they caught him. They estimate anywhere between 50 and 100 million at this point. And they wrote this great book on it. And he forged Ruth, he forged Gehrig. So there are basically two kinds of forged signatures. Well, three kinds. One is little kids who can sign a baseball, which is this one up here, which obviously you see looks nothing like this one, which is real. Then you have secretarials, which again, players got so many requests that they had to get help in signing. Mantle even had his mistress sign for him. Babe Ruth, Mantle, DiMaggio, and Gehrig had Pete Sheehy, their clubhouse guy, sign for them. And then when Babe Ruth was dying in 1948, he had his wife Claire and his nurse sign for him. So anything that you see with 1948 on it, was not signed by Ruth. And then, of course, they're malicious forgeries that are just done to make money. So you can see here, PSA estimates that only 6% of Beatles signatures are authentic, 24% of Elvis and Marilyn, 33% of Tiger, and 40% of Babe Ruth. So that's something you have to be very careful of and something you have to take into account when you're valuing. So let's talk about sports memorabilia. So not signed, game used. So the same thing as we're talking about, historical importance and enduring legacy of the player, the team, and the event, the rarity, the quality, the desirability, the condition, authenticity, and provenance. So items from World Series and All-Star games and championships are generally going to be worth more than items from the regular season. So again, in our players, who are the athletes that are going to have the most value? It's your top Hall of Famers. Babe Ruth, even though he died in 48, today is still the #1 collected athlete, as you're going to see. His bats, game-used bats, and his uniforms can sell, and his caps sell from the hundreds of thousands of dollars into the millions. But as you're going to see, Brady, Gretzky, Woods, and Jordan have now all pierced the $1 million mark. And that happened all during COVID. So what's the most valuable piece of sports memorabilia ever sold? It's Babe Ruth's called shot jersey from Game 3 of the 1932 World Series. And what the lore is in that game is that he was being heckled by the Chicago Cubs bench, and he pointed towards center field. That's what people think, that he was going to hit a home run. And the next ball came up from Charlie Root, home run. And this is the jersey that he wore doing it. And as you can see on the right here, what's become very important in authentication is photo matching. It used to be that you would send off a game-used jersey or a bat to an authenticator, and they would look at it and they would render their opinion based on their experience. But now we have photo matching, which has really come about over the past 12 years. And that's raised the market significantly because it's raised the confidence in people in the item being exactly what it is. So this jersey sold in 2005 for $940,000. In 2024, last August, $24 million. 20 times the amount, 24 times the amount. I'm not sure if you bought Apple stock that you could have made as good a killing as for that jersey. But because it was photo match and because Babe Ruth is so important and because this is one of the greatest or most notable moments of his career, that's why it's valued that way. That's why it's sold for that. But again, you can see good, better, best. A signed jersey from Yogi Berra is going to be at auction a couple $100. Retail, it may be 500 to 1,000, but a game worn jersey, this sold for 38,000, and this was before COVID. That probably on today's market is going to be closer to 100,000, maybe 150. This was the jersey he wore catching Don Larson's 1956 World Series perfect game, the only perfect game ever thrown in World Series history. That sold 10 years ago for 560,000, and today that's probably 2 to 3 million easily. But again, you see in looking at the sports memorabilia, signed puck 100, 150 for Gretzky, a signed hockey stick, but a game used in signed hockey stick 1,200 to 1,500. A game used worn jersey 11,000. It can be, depending on the regular series season game, can be, and whether it's photo match, can be as high as like 75 or 100,000. But the jersey he wore in 1988, clinching his last Stanley Cup with the Edmonton Oilers, $1,450,000. $1,450,000, which is probably more than maybe more or as much. I gotta look this up of what he was being paid at the time. Same thing with Mickey Mantle. Store model glove, $50. A first baseman's glove from his estate. Now, of course, he was known as the great center fielder for the Yankees. First baseman's glove was at the end of his career. That sold for 18,000. Again, on today's market, that would probably sell for 50. But from the height of his career playing center field, 225,000 for a game worn glove. And on today's market, that's probably going to be closer to 500,000. Perception and accessibility. So I was talking earlier, I think, about perception and the change of being undervalued. For years, Willie Mays, Hank Aaron, Frank Robinson, McCovey, and Jackie Robinson stuff sold for a lesser money than their counterparts of Mantle and such, basically because the black memorabilia market was not as high as the white. That's changed completely. The market has become colorblind. In 2017, on the left-hand side here, this is Jackie Robinson's rookie jersey when he broke the color line in 47. That sold for $2 million. But 7 years later, in this post-COVID market, a 51 Robinson jersey sold for $5.5 million. So now his rookie jersey, which is much more important than the 51 jersey, because it's his first year, and the first of something is always more important because it sets the foundation. That jersey today is probably 10 to 15 million, if not more, particularly based on the sale of Babe Ruth's jersey selling last year for 24 million. And it could sell for more. It's a wild card at this point. But you can see in just this, in a relatively short period of time, the amount of appreciation. This is a questionnaire that Robinson filled out in 1946, talks about his hobbies, but what his ambition in baseball was. He was signed, by the way, by Branch Rickey in 46. He was sent to Montreal and then broke the color line in Brooklyn in 47. So his ambition in baseball was to open the door for Negroes in organized ball. And that's what he did. And that's why that sold for 1.6 million. And the bat from 1955, that's from 55. What's important about that is that one, on a scale of 1 to 10, it's been graded a 10, and the other is 55 is one of his greatest years. 47 is his rookie year, and he won Rookie of the Year. 49 was his MVP year. 55 was the only year the Brooklyn Dodgers won the World Series, and the only time they played the Yankees 6 times while Robinson was playing for the Dodgers. It's the only time they beat the Yankees. Again, teams that are important: 27 Yankees, 86 Celtics, 55 Dodgers. The more important the team and their legacy, the more the value. 27 Yankee ball here, great condition, and also had the provenance of being from Earl Combs. It was his personal ball. Great condition. The Robert Kraft Super Bowl ring, greatest comeback in Super Bowl history, 28-3. Bob sold that during COVID to raise funds for COVID relief, sold for $1 million. Now, if it hadn't been for COVID relief, would have had impact, probably would have sold, but still closer to $250,000. And a 1912 Red Sox trophy, their second World Series ring, win $239,000. These are all milestone items too, and these all sold for about 10 years ago, which means all these values here are probably at least doubled or tripled, but I wanted to show you. Micah Ruzione's game used jersey from the Miracle on Ice, $657,000. Kirk Gibson's batting helmet for his walk-off home run against Dennis Eckersley. The bat and the jersey. And Horton Smith, who won the first Masters ever, his jacket sold for $682,000. Again, that was over 10 years ago. That today is 2 to 3 million easily. But again, these are all milestones. That's what makes them important. You could buy a Kirk Gibson game used bat for $1,000 from a regular season. You could buy a Ruzione from when he played at BC for, again, $1,000. A member's green jacket, not a Masters related, would probably cost you a few $1,000s. This was the catalyst, by the way, in COVID. This is the catalyst for the rise in the market. And this was the catalyst for other sports reaching the same level or close to same level as baseball. It's all about Michael Jordan. So I don't know how many of you saw the documentary in 2020 called The Last Dance. It was about the 1998 Bulls season. They knew that the general manager, Jerry Krause, was going to dismantle the team. So it was their last hurrah with Pippen and Jordan and Jackson all together. And they ended up three-peating. They won their 6th championship. Well, this did not get run, even though they did this in 1998 and they filmed it. It wasn't until 2020 that they actually ran this documentary because Michael Jordan did not cooperate until 2019 to make it happen because he wanted to reestablish himself as the greatest player ever. So if you remember COVID, we sat at home, there were no sports being played. So I don't know how many of you watched this. I know my husband and I watched this, I think 3 times because we had nothing else in April and May. This changed the Michael Jordan market forever. Before this documentary, you could buy a Jordan game used jersey for between $20,000 and $175,000. You could buy game used sneakers for $5,000 to $55,000. Now remember those numbers. After the Jordan Last Dance effect, Sotheby's sold his Game 1 NBA Finals Last Dance game worn jersey for $10 million. That's not a typo. 10 million. That was 3 million more than a Babe Ruth jersey had sold 2 years prior. It was a record for a game used jersey, and it turned the market upside down. Now, all of a sudden, game used jerseys for Jordan, 35,000 to 650,000. And the difference on these jerseys, now if you go and get one authenticated but have no photo match, it's going to be worth 35,000 to 65,000, maybe 75. If you get it photo matched, it's a minimum of 350,000. That's the difference in what photo matching makes. The same thing in Jordan game used sneakers. And you see this is a group of Jordan sneakers all worn when clinching the Bulls 6 championships. He kept 6 of them and he gave 6 of them to a close friend of his who was the marketing director on the team, who sold them in 2024 for $8 million. They're not even matched. You only get one sneaker, $8 million. But that's the effect of the market for Jordan and COVID. People started going crazy. People realized this was something to invest in, and then for years had been undervalued. It's no longer an undervalued market, and it keeps going up at the top, as you can see for the Ruth jersey at 24 million, because that was more than double the Jordan jersey, and that set the new record and set the new ceiling. So here's some other pieces that have sold now at the high end because of Jordan. It's pulled up the entire market. Rookie jersey just sold last month for 4.2 million. Kobe Bryant game worn jersey, 5.8 million. No, if he had not, I don't think it would have sold as much if he hadn't died tragically in the helicopter accident. It probably would be closer in the $1 million range. But because he died tragically, it does have an effect on desirability. LeBron James, Game 7 jersey, 3.6 million. Now, because players now change jerseys out, in the olden days, you might get 3 jerseys a season or 4. Nowadays, these players churn them out every game, halves of games. LeBron regular season jerseys now are between 50,000 and 200,000 photo match. But again, something from the All-Star game or an MVP related or something that is from the NBA Finals, much more valuable. Wilt Chamberlain, 4.9 million. Hard to believe that Wilt would be less than Kobe, but the contemporary market has also taken a huge jump over the vintage market the last several years. Tiger Woods, change in perception. So the nadir of his career, I'm sure you all remember when his wife caught him, they having the affair, chased him. This is the bottom of his career in 2010. These are his Grand Slam irons that he used for the Tiger Slam when he won the US Open, the British, the PGA, and the Masters all in a row. $57,000. 2022, Tiger's made a comeback. He won the Masters in 2019. He's now considered to be one of the elder statesmen, greatest player of all time. 5.1 million. It's quite the investment. Is that 100 times? Yes, 100 times what they sold 12 years prior. And that's not even including the driver or the putter. Other milestone events. Again, people are more excited than ever. Shohei Ohtani, his 50th home run ball when he became the first player to hit 50 home runs and steal 50 bases in a season, 4.3 million. Aaron Judge's 62nd home run ball, 1.5 million. Freddie Freeman's Grand Slam walk-off home run, the World Series, first time that had happened for a Grand Slam, 1.56 million. But not everything goes up. In 1999, Todd McFarlane paid $3 million for Mark McGwire's 70th home run ball. But since then, Barry Bonds broke the record, and you had the Mitchell report came out with a number of players being caught for taking steroids or accused of taking steroids, including McGwire. That ball today, 150,000 to 200,000. Football, just like basketball, the needle is at the top of the market has accelerated dramatically. It's now eclipsed $1 million. Joe Montana Super Bowl jersey, Brady final career jersey, 1.4 million. Brady all-time passing yards, 504. Brady's final Michigan jersey just sold this past year, $792,000. These are some other categories: trophies, awards, jewelry, and these give you an idea of the wide range depending on the player, the team, and the year. Everything: Stanley Cups, $5,000 to 100, MVP awards, 50,000 to 2 million, depending on who won it. World Series trophies, 50,000 to 250. Masters trophies. These were created in the 1990s, and all the winners could buy them for $10,000 a piece. Now they regularly sell $300,000 to $800,000. And that's not including if you had Jack or Arnie or Tiger, those for sure would eclipse $1 million easily. Super Bowl trophies, 10,000 to 250. Championship rings, 10,000 to 6,000. And as I said earlier, my methodology is I go look for comps. There are at least 10 major auction houses that all have auction databases, many of them that go back anywhere from 10 to 25 years. And that's where I look up where similar items have sold and then do my comparisons. I also have a big advantage over a lot of people, appraisers, in that I've done a lot of insurance appraisals. So I have a lot of private sales data that a lot of other people don't have. And that makes a huge difference because that can show a different side of the market, particularly on the high end. So there's all kinds of sports memorabilia. I mean, you have tickets that can start at $5 and go up. You have programs that can start at $5 that go up. But the 1903 World Series program, the first one ever played, 131,000. Again, it's the very first. Even a non-Red Sox fan would be interested in that. But 44 World Series, at that point, they produced a lot of these. They were easy to get. That's why you could buy that for $264. Super Bowl tickets, the first one, again, is going to cost anywhere $10,000 probably to 25. There's one that sold for 19, and a full run that's been graded is going to cost at least $50,000. We've got documents here. The most important documents ever sold, the original rules of basketball, Dr. James Nesmith, Springfield, of course, was sold by his son for $4.38 million in 2010. Again, on today's market, I figured they'd be 6 to 8 million. The laws of baseball, which changed the game, it codified, made it 9 innings, strikes and balls, gave it the structure that it has, the modern game has today. 3.3 million today, probably 6 to 8 million. But you could buy Floyd Patterson and Sonny Liston fight contract for a couple $1,000s. So again, a wide range between the bottom and the top. There's something for every collector. Let's talk about cards. Steve, how much time do I have?
Why don't we say 10 minutes?
Okay, so we're going to finish on cards here. So I don't know who sent in the Hank Aaron card, but we value cards similarly to sports memorabilia. But this is the issue. What year and who produced it, the issue, the player, the grading, and as you can see on the right-hand side with this Henry Aaron, the 54, a lot of these items get hermetically sealed now. They get sent out to an authenticator such as PSA. They send them, they have 2 graders who look at them, place a grade of 1 to 10 on them, and then they slab them and give them a barcode, and then put them in a tamper-proof holder so that now you can carry that around. Now, to me, it takes the soul out of them, but it sets the market. Because if you know now, if you have a PSA grade 1 or a PSA 9, what the market's going to be. So let's look at the 59 Hank Aaron. This I would guess would grade probably, and I'm not a professional grader. I don't play one on TV, but I've looked at thousands of cards. So I would probably put this between a 3 and a 4, because you look at how the margins are set. I mean, remember, you guys, these were a penny. These were cut by machines. But today, they're looked at under microscopes. So you look at the corners to see if they've been worn. You look at the margins to see how they've been cut. And you look at the freshness, how much of gloss is left. And this seems to me a little wear on the edges. Let's cut 60-40. So probably between a 3 and a 4. Now, I could be wrong, but that's what I'm thinking. So that would put it between $100 and $150. Well, you can see how many have been sent to PSA that have been graded. This is called a population report. So poor PSA 1, there are 177 that were graded that, $50. 509 that were graded PSA 2, 885. And you can see there's kind of a curve here where people will send in, because it doesn't pay for you to send one in that's PSA 1, because it's going to cost you a minimum of $25 to get it appraised. To get it graded. But so you'll see that most of them are going to be 4, 5s, and 6s, and that makes sense. But as you get to the higher levels here, you're going to have less and less and less graded. And that's why the value goes up, because as you go up in grade, the rarity also increases. You're going to have, because look, we played with them. You flipped them, you put them in bicycle spokes. You know, there are very few kids that, just put them in their shoe boxes and kept them forever. So that's why there's only one on a scale of 1 to 10 that's graded a 10. And that's why that one's at 250,000, whereas most of the cards you're going to see are between $75 and $600. Now, I put this 54 Aaron in there because I wanted you to see the difference, because that's his rookie card. So already that's going to start at a much higher value, because a rookie card is going to have a lot more desirability. So you've got 1,600 it starts here with, and you see how many more have been sent in for grading, because again, the potential of the higher value. And so you see how it starts at 1,600 and it goes to 2 million. It's like winning the lottery to have that one card out of thousands, or two cards out of thousands that have been graded that could grade out at a PSA 10. But most of those rookie cards are going to be between $2,400 and probably $5,500. See? Same thing for the 64 Pete Rose. Again, I would say this one's probably going to be about a 3, which puts it at $200. But look, they start at $100, and there's never even been one that's been graded at a PSA 10. So who knows what that could sell for? We would certainly sell for a multiple. I'm thinking at least $200,000 to $300,000. And I wanted to show, and here's Pete Rose's rookie card. And can you believe it? Topps thought so little of him that they put him on a rookie card with 3 other guys who we've never probably even heard of. But again, his rookie card starts at 750 and goes all the way up to 3 million for the one that's been graded. But most of them are going to sell between $1,000 and $4,000. So some of you may have cards that are in the 80s and 90s, not good. That was when Topps lost their monopoly. And at that point, cards were being produced by Upper Deck and Fleer and Donruss and Panini and a whole host. And they just overproduced the bejesus out of them. And most of them are worth pennies today. Now, there are exceptions. The major exception is Michael Jordan. His rookie card is an 86 Fleer, even though his first year was 84, 85. Don't ask me why. Before COVID, now this is graded on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the top, so it's the top. You can see how much the market has changed before and after COVID. Before COVID, you could have bought one in this grade at $25,000. Now it's 160 to 200,000. But look at 2021 at the height of COVID, you would have had to pay $300,000 to $700,000. So it does go to show you that not everything goes up, and the danger of multiples. There are 326 of these that have been graded Gem Mint 10. And what happened in COVID is that the card market went like this because people scoured, because cards started selling at a premium. But then people started scouring their attics and cellars and closets, just like you're thinking of doing now. And they sent the cards to PSA. At one point, they had a 12 million card backlog. 12 million. So the market went like this, and then it came down. But as you can see, it still has not come back to post-COVID, to pre-COVID prices. I mean, that's huge. And so if you bought prior to COVID, you had a really good investment. Same thing for this LeBron James. You see in COVID, 344, then 660. And look, now it's down to 122. But before COVID, you could have bought one, I think, for about 25 to 50,000. The number one collected card is Honus Wagner. And that's because they're, believe it or not, it's rare, but there are 60 known. But the story is that they stopped the print run because Honus Wagner made them stop. And this card you could have bought in poor condition in 2007 at Sotheby's for about 150,000. Look now, a half of a Wagner sold for $475,000. 475. Now, if you had the other half, I'm guessing you could put it together and you just might be able to double it. But you can see here how much this market has gone up. And you also have to be careful because they have reprinted them. When I was at Sotheby's, we sold the Honus Wagner, and I was getting 5 calls a day afterwards. I have a Honus Wagner. And I'd say, well, flip it over and tell me what's on the back. And they'd say, well, a Honus Wagner, sold for 35,000. This was like in 1999. And I'd say, yes, that shows you that it's a reprint. But they've produced many of them, so beware. Mickey Mantle. So sign cards, the market in COVID went up. You could have bought a Mickey Mantle sign card 10 years ago for probably $5,000 in 2010. And then it went up, 2010 for about 5. And then see the progression, 26, 48, 78. It's gone back and here to 264,000, 288,000. Why is that? Because it was, again, considered an undervalued market. It no longer is that way. All right, 403, I did okay. So now I know, hopefully you will run to your closets, hopefully your attics, find something that's really great. If we have time, I'm happy to take any questions if you have them.
Lee, I think we've pretty much run out of time. And what I'd like to encourage people to do is, if you do have a question for Lee, why don't you send me an email with the question and I'll forward it along and see if we can, get an answer for you. But this has been an absolutely wonderful hour, and can't tell you how much we appreciate your time and bringing your expertise here to the latest segment of our "How Do I Value That?" And I want to express my personal appreciation because I know how busy you are. And thank you so much for making time for MBREA. Folks, I think we should perhaps give Lee one of our virtual rounds of applause.
Well, thank you.
And
I appreciate it. And listen, you guys, I just want to finish off. So I'm up in Massachusetts often. My mom still lives in Milford. I still have a house in Milford. There have been some great things that have been come out of Massachusetts. At least 3 Ted Williams jerseys have come out of closets. I valued one at Antiques Roadshow a couple of years ago that came into Sturbridge. The gentleman's mother was a Ted Williams fan, thought he was a dreamboat, and took care of a friend's son and daughter, who turns out to be a Quincy sports writer and a good friend of Williams. He gave her a jersey from Ted Williams to say thank you. It was from his 1946 MVP season. I don't know if you saw the roadshow segment. It would be worth 500,000 to 700,000, but she used to like to wear it, so she cut off 10 inches. $200,000, the most expensive bolt of material ever. But if you find something like that, please let us know. You can email Steve or you can email me directly too. Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure being here today. I appreciate it.
thank you, Lee. Have a great afternoon.
Take care.
Bye now.